Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this series of videos on three-dimensional geometry. So 3D geometry is basically three-dimensional geometry. Here, we will look into a lot of interesting things. You will already been studying about two-dimensional geometry. That's not something that's very new for you, because you've already been studying points, lines. What is the equation of a straight line passing through 2 points? What is the slope of a line? A lot of these things you've already seen in your 10th. Now we will move on to doing the same thing for three-dimensional geometry. Let's actually set a right introduction as to how interesting this chapter is and why should actually you be studying this chapter. So, for example, I have an aeroplane. I have this aircraft which looks something like this. This looks more like a fish. Anyways, imagine this to be an aircraft. Now, this aircraft moves in your three-dimensional space, right? So the world around us is actually a three-dimensional space. So I can represent this three-dimensional space using this coordinate system. This is something that you already know. Now, if my aeroplane has to start from this point, if it has to start from this point and go to this point, if it has to go from A to B in the shortest time, what should its velocity be? Like, how should I project this point so that in this three-dimensional space, it starts from here and reaches this in the quickest time? That can be one application of three-dimensional geometry that you're going to learn. Coming to something that's different, and that is, if the same aeroplane is actually informed, so it gets a message that it is not supposed to enter a particular zone. So for example, in your three-dimensional space, in the same three-dimensional space, what I will do is, I will actually create a plane. And I will say that this is a zone of harmful radiations. So this is a zone of harmful radiation. So if your aeroplane enters this particular zone, then it's likely to be in danger. So you have to make sure that throughout the course of its motion, from this A point to B point, it does not enter this particular plane. Now, for that, if I can represent this plane mathematically, if I can represent its motion, if I can represent the motion of this mathematically, then with the help of, so this is mathematically, then with the help of equations, I can make sure that the motion of this is always away from this plane. I can make sure that I move this plane in such a manner that it never enters this plane. But how will I ever know that? For that, I need to have a representation of this plane, a representation of this motion, a representation of this line joining these two, right? It can have, I need to actually represent all these quantities mathematically, first of all. And then with the help of equations, where I will put a condition on the motion that it is not supposed to enter this plane, right? With the help of those equations, I can make sure that my plane ends up avoiding this, the aeroplane ends up avoiding this plane throughout its motion, right? This could be one application like this. There are thousands and thousands of such applications of 3D geometry, which you will actually understand. After you actually understand this chapter, you will know how to actually apply this knowledge in real life, right? So three-dimensional geometry has a lot to do in with real life examples, because our real life is actually 3-dimensional, right? It is actually having 3 dimensions in nature. You look at some corner of your wall, you'll see 3 dimensions, right? You'll see these 3 dimensions. So if I can represent each and every point in this 3-dimensional space, if I can represent each and every quantity in 3-dimensional space, then doing such calculations, forming such equations and forming such situations becomes much more easy, right? So this is the reason why we are studying 3-dimensional geometry. Let us now jump into the chapter and look at some important concepts.